on to catch up with Matthew Dickinson, Mayor of Dubbo Retail Council. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, sorry about the background noise there. I knew as soon as we start the interview there'd be an announcement about the next flight that's about to leave.
So you are spending your morning in Dubbo Airport, and I've spent a lot of time myself over the years, but we'll try and do our best given the circumstances.
Well, I've made the step from Dubbo. I'm actually sitting at Sydney Airport at the moment. Took the early flight out of Dubbo, so just waiting here for the next flight.
Oh, goodness me, you're a very busy man. So, speaking of busyness, there was a council meeting not too long ago with lots of things touched on. And, well, speaking of touching, touch footy is one of the big topics that did come up.
Yeah, it wasn't actually at the council meeting. It was the day after the council meeting that this announcement was made. But Port Macquarie have had there's a conference, a Northern Conference touch football conference that's on, and that's something where lots of juniors descend on Port Macquarie. They have done for the last 2 years, except they haven't because of the rain. So that's been a big issue for New South Wales Touch. They haven't been able to hold that tournament for the last 2 years. It's a 3-year contract they have with Port Macquarie, but in the end, they made a decision, which is a pretty tough decision to make, to say that they're not going to hold it in Port Macquarie next year. So they had to look for somewhere else to hold it, and they looked around the state and they decided on Dubbo being the place they would hold that tournament. Now, I'm sure that doesn't put me in the best books with the Port Macquarie Mayor. I'll have to have a talk to her and see if I'm still on talking terms with her. But from a Dubbo perspective, it's absolutely fantastic. We will see probably 10,000 people descend on Dubbo in February next year. It'll go over about 4 days. We expect already every accommodation place has been booked out for February. We're also seeing places like Narromine, Gilgandra, even as far away as Parks are getting inquiries about accommodation. We'll see cafes, restaurants, the whole place will be absolutely buzzing with people there for that touch footy tournament. And then, if we can pull it off and make it a fantastic tournament, they'll be going out to tender for the next 3 years after that. Now, Port Macquarie will be putting back in for that tender, but Dubbo, if we can do it really well next year, will be in a really strong position to get that going forward.
And, of course, all the footy codes are incredibly strong in Dubbo, and touch footy is no exception. So that's going to be absolutely huge, and that's February next year.
February next year, that's right. And look, it's one of those things. We've got lots of great sporting fields in Dubbo. We've typically got often cricket tournaments that are held. We've held other junior touch footy conferences or carnivals as well. So there is lots of sport that happens, and people think sport might be just good for our residents to play sport on weekends, but it is actually a really important driver for the economy as well, because when you do bring these tournaments in, especially the junior ones, I love the junior ones because juniors can't drive cars, so they've got to have mum and dad come with them. Mum and dad then normally bring siblings along, so you end up with one person playing in the tournament and maybe 4 or 5 people coming, which is why we're going to have those 10,000 people here in Dubbo next year for that touch footy conference.
Well, it feels like it's going to be absolutely massive. Now, there was an announcement that I do know was mentioned at the council meeting, and that is that there is plans for a new amenity block. Tell us where and a little bit about why it's going to be really super unique.
Well, that's in the Lions Park in West Dubbo, and that's not really that big a deal doing a new amenity block, but this one we're about to go to tender for, we're only going to accept tenders from organisations that can 3D print the amenity block. Now, there's been a previous motion of council a couple of months ago about 3D printing some houses next year. We've got 4 blocks in a housing development where we're going to reserve those specifically for 3D printing companies. So there'll be houses that'll be 3D printed. But an amenity block is a much simpler construction, and so we thought it would be a good chance for us to see, almost test the waters or demonstrate the 3D printing technology in something much simpler like an amenity block. We believe that we can actually get a 3D printing company that will do it cheaper and faster than a normal amenity block, and again, a chance for someone to demonstrate their technology, their capabilities, and then when the 3D printed houses goes forward next year, they'll be in with a bit of a head start on any other company because they've already shown the technology in the Dubbo community. So that's pretty exciting, and I think then we'll see other things that maybe can be 3D printed in the future. But this one will be going out to tender very shortly, so any company out there, any organisation that can 3D print will be looking for those tenders. And I think what we've already seen with the housing discussion, we've seen lots of companies come forward, have discussions with Dubbo Council around that. We've even seen companies from Singapore come forward and have discussions with Council around the 3D printed housing. Let's see how many companies we get for this particular tender.
Absolutely fantastic. And watching the videos that there are online of 3D printing in building is absolutely fascinating.
It is actually fascinating, isn't it? They set up the gantry and you sit back and it almost comes out like a toothpaste and then builds the walls and builds it up in layer by layer. And before you know it, you've got this whole construction there. So it is fascinating technology to watch. The actual construction should be a very solid construction. And again, that price and the actual time to construct, and construction pressures are on lots of builders at the moment in terms of how many things you can build and the price of those. So I think this will be a really exciting thing for Dubbo.
Absolutely, and I mean, housing is definitely one of those things in short supply, but the other thing that is in short supply right across the listening area and across the country really is skilled employees. There's going to be a new report about ways that we can support those who've moved out here for work.
Well, it's in particular about migrants that have moved from somewhere else in the world and have ended up in Australia. And we love when people come from across the world to live in our great country. But some of those people, maybe the support services aren't quite good enough, but we don't really know enough about that. So a resolution of council last Thursday night was to create or generate a report that looks at that gap analysis on the migrant support services. When we get people that come from across the world and come to Dubbo, or we get people that have moved from somewhere around the world to maybe Sydney in recent years and then we end up getting them in Dubbo, we want to know if there's enough support there for those migrants to be able to stay in Dubbo, because it can be a bit lonely. When you come from another country and you end up in Dubbo, you might know many people, you might know the background, the culture, so getting those support services is really important. Are those support services good enough? Well, we're not quite sure, so let's do a gap analysis on that and see what support services there are, and then we might need to go to the state government and ask them for some more support services to help these migrants when they do end up in Dubbo.
And of course there is all those calls that are happening at the federal level as well to increase the inflow of migrants to help increase the skilled employee base basically in Australia. So is that something that the Dubbo region will probably be pushing for as well once this report is completed?
Well, I think that push is already happening at the moment, and certainly we've been having discussions with the federal government as well around exactly that. But I think it's the secondary part. We think we can get some of those migrants here, and we do see them come on a regular basis. I love doing citizenship ceremonies where people come from around the world to be in Dubbo. But again, we want to keep them here. We want to make sure that once they do arrive in Dubbo, we've got all the support services that can look after them when they get here. So it's probably a two-step process. We want the federal government to allow more people to come in, but then we want to look after them when they get here.
Well, it's great to see that there is so much looking towards the future happening in terms of Dubbo Regional Council. Thank you so much for catching up with us, Mayor of the Dubbo Region, Matthew Dickinson.
My pleasure. Always good to chat to 2Web.